Hello and welcome to the May version of the Bankruptcy Nerd Alert. I am your favorite bankruptcy nerd, Jen Lee. And if you've never seen someone so excited about bankruptcy, you get to now. So every month I go through and talk about the numbers that are coming in from bankruptcy filings, mostly so attorneys, bankruptcy and non-bankruptcy, know what's going on in the market. A lot of times we are the precursor to many other things that happen. And so this is my attempt at bringing numbers and bankruptcy nerdiness into everybody's life. So let's jump in and I will share my presentation that runs the numbers, which is very similar every month. I try to keep it consistent so that we can go through, what to expect, I guess. Let me turn off my video because it's helpful. And who am I? I am a bankruptcy attorney. I am a super bankruptcy nerd. And I help lawyers who want to add bankruptcy to their practice. I have a full self-paced workshop that adds bankruptcy from start to finish. And continuing like trainings, education. I do a lot of mentoring, a lot of case review. And so that's the full workshop to add bankruptcy. I also do support staff training because support staff can make your life a whole lot easier as a bankruptcy attorney if they know exactly what to do and why they're doing it. And so I do a lot of software and a lot of just client skills training for support staff. Bankruptcy Toolbox is a community I run online that is daily marketing materials that you can use. It is trainings, there's monthly trainings, there are on like, now I wouldn't say random trainings, but there are ones that I'll add in there when I hear someone struggling with something. I will add a training for it. Lots of discussion on running a bankruptcy firm and that kind of thing. And then Launchpad is my free community for lawyers, not just bankruptcy lawyers, who want to talk about different ways of running law firms that aren't the same way things have always been done. So all of those you can find at lawyersuccessnetwork.com or just reach out to me and I can walk you through. YouTube channel also has some walkthroughs of them. So let's jump into the May numbers. My favorite day of the month is when all the numbers get compiled and I can take a look at them. So the headline for May was the sky is falling, Chicken Little again. Subchapter 5's increased by 36%. So I saw the headline and then I went in to look at the other numbers to see if it was all that way or if there were others. And so for subchapter 5, it was a 36% increase. And remember, subchapter 5 is small business bankruptcies. There's a fairly low debt ceiling on it. So it's really designed to be for small businesses that can't really afford a large scale chapter 11. So that did increase 36%. That was lower than the April over April increase. And I think a lot of what we're seeing with subchapter 5 is the stress on small businesses, the costs of materials, the costs of just doing business. It's hard when you have very thin profit margins and then costs go up. So I think we're continuing to see that. Also, subchapter 5 in the grand scheme of things is fairly new. It launched in February of 2020. And as we all know what happened in March of 2020, there weren't a lot of them the first few years during COVID. And I think we're seeing more and more people figuring out what they are and how to use them. And so we'll probably continue to see an increase there. Commercial chapter 11s was the only decrease this month. It was a 7% decrease from May 2025 to May 2026. And for those who haven't watched me before, there is a reason why I do year over year instead of month over month. Year over year tends to show better the cycles that are happening in the bankruptcy world. Month to month, there's a lot of variability because of cycles. And a lot of times it's not necessarily commercial, it's more on the individual side. When kids get out of school, bankruptcy filings tend to drop. People aren't thinking about it as much. The same thing like between November and December, between Thanksgiving and Christmas, bankruptcy filings usually aren't like top of people's mind. And so by comparing year over year, we're comparing the seasons instead of month to month, where April may have been much higher than May because people were getting their tax refunds or they were getting their tax refunds intercepted and were filing, that kind of thing. So that's why I compare year over year more so than month over month. And for those of you who listen to this every month, I do explain this every month because I want people who are jumping in to understand the method to the madness. Individual chapter 7s. So there was a 10% increase here for individual Chapter 7s from May 2025 to May 2026. This is slightly less than the April increase, which was about 14%, I believe. And I think this is pretty common. This is what we're seeing like as a standard increase because people are struggling and people are trying to make ends meet and they're not able to. And so we're continuing to see the increase in Chapter 7s. Keep in mind that about 75% of individual filings are Chapter 7s and about 25% are Chapter 13s. So that's something also when we start looking at the overall number of filings, the weighted average, it can be very different because Chapter 7s are much higher in the number game. Speaking of Chapter 13, there was a 3% increase in Chapter 13. And I will remind you, as your favorite bankruptcy nerd, that Chapter 13 is a reorganization for individuals. It can be a small business owner, but it's a sole prop usually. The individual has to file. An entity cannot file Chapter 13. So the gotcha with that is that people have to have actual regular monthly income to propose a reorganization plan. And so when we see jobs, people losing jobs or unemployment increasing, Chapter 13s will often go down because there aren't people who are able to file Chapter 13, but sometimes they're filing Chapter 7s. So just something to keep in mind. Like I said, the numbers are the numbers, but there's ways to spin them and the ways to explain them. And that's what I'm trying to do so that people understand. I will say that a 3% increase is still an increase in Chapter 13. It's pretty holding steady though. And I think that's just because, again, the seasonality, school is coming to an end. People are not necessarily thinking of filing bankruptcy as the summer starts and that kind of thing too. So total individual filings year over year was an 8% increase. So between Chapter 7 and 13, it was about an 8% increase, which makes sense because if we look at that 10% Chapter 7 and 3% Chapter 13, Chapter 7s are a lot more than Chapter 13. And so it skews up the individual filings because of the Chapter 7 numbers. So it was an 8% increase. Again, steady increase that has been a trend for the last couple of years. Pretty standard increase. Some months are higher, some a little bit lower, but that's been pretty standard. Chapter 12s. So I threw Chapter 12s in last month because there was a huge increase that I wanted to point out because sometimes so Chapter 12s are family farmers and fishermen. They are not common cases for the average bankruptcy attorney to file. There aren't very many of them out there, but family farmers and fishermen have a special section in the bankruptcy code because the administration of animals and crops is a whole other animal compared to other types of assets. So there's a separate Chapter 12. And this can kind of be the canary in the coal mine because if Chapter 12s are increasing, that means farmers, especially small farms, are stressed. And that often has a ripple effect into the economy. Prices go up, domino into prices in the grocery stores. And then as they're going out of business, supply and demand is messed up. So I left Chapter 12 in here this month. It wasn't the huge increase that it was in April, but it still was a 7% increase. And so I want to kind of keep my eye on it to see what Chapter 12s are doing and where they're being filed at. I believe Minnesota was actually the highest number of Chapter 12s. And I maybe don't quote me on that, but I think I read an article because I do a lot of bankruptcy nerd reading that was looking at the family farmers and fishermen, especially I live in North Dakota. And so I'm kind of in the middle of keeping an eye on it anyway. So upcoming events. So if this is interesting to you, Bankruptcy Toolbox has a bunch of things out there that you can nerd out on. Last week, I had a really fun time. We did a training called Survivor Means Test Island. And it basically went through the means test line by line on where you're going to get voted off the island by the trustee, where you're going to invite inquiry from the United States trustee, where you can ask your client for more information to help them better. And so that is about a little over an hour-long training. It is in the Learning Center in Bankruptcy Toolbox. It's not in the Videos and Replays channel because it was too long for the Videos and Replays channel. Also, if you have previously bought my bankruptcy from start to finish, you get access to this. I added it to your profile, so go check it out. June 9th, Hypo Hour at 4 p.m. Central. Hypo Hour is where once a month I open up a Zoom room and you get to bring any weird bankruptcy questions that you have about your cases, about weird things you saw. If you're looking for support on a particular legal issue, I will often help draft things. So Hypo Hour is second Tuesday of the month at 4 p.m. So the next one is next Tuesday. And then the Bankruptcy Business Lab is back. So the Bankruptcy Business Lab is a 12-month training of the business side of running a bankruptcy firm. And the topics generally tend to be things I've sent surveys out and gotten back as highly valued trainings. And so what that consists of is each month there is a training that's posted the first week of the month on a theme. And then you can watch the training whenever you want. There's usually an activity, a lab activity that helps you personally walk through your own business with whatever the topic is. And this month is Stop Being the Bottleneck. And this is very common where our solos or small firms are trying to run a firm and they're the bottleneck because we either can't delegate, we haven't let go of things. And so that's this month's theme. Then on June 25th, so it's usually the fourth Thursday of the month, except for a couple months where that's a holiday, we do a live mastermind where anyone who's in Bankruptcy Toolbox and wants to talk about the theme can log in and share what they're doing, what they're struggling with, and we kind of crowdsource some ideas. So that is on June 25th. And you do have access to the last 12 months of all the trainings in Bankruptcy Toolbox, as well as you see the schedule for the upcoming 12 months. So all kinds of stuff in there. As a reminder, if you're looking for your own personal bankruptcy nerd, I'm here to help. Bankruptcy from start to finish. I can help you with adding bankruptcy. I have a lot of firms right now who are hiring associates that they want to add bankruptcy to their firm, and I get to do like the in-house training for them. So I can customize it. I can do a lot of things. I do a lot of case review. I love getting questions and figuring out how to get people through their first few cases. So all of that's available at lawyersuccessnetwork.com. If you are a bankruptcy nerd like me, I do post these bankruptcy nerd alerts towards the beginning of the month when all the numbers come out. And I hope to see you next month for Bankruptcy Nerd Alert. There is also an article out there, just if anyone's curious, of all of the increases in bankruptcy filings by state. And I will put it in the comments because it was fascinating. 49 states had increases in Q1. One state did not. Maine was the only one that did not have an increase in bankruptcy filings. So I will put that in the comments as a bankruptcy nerd. Questions, comments, reach out to me. I am happy to